It's my honor today to introduce our presenter, colleague, and friend, Professor Richard Harvey. He's a faculty member in the Institute for Holistic Health Studies. Previously, he worked as epidemiologist in Orange County, California, UC Irvine Tobacco Use Research Center. His research includes developing holistic health stress reduction interventions using biofeedback and other techniques and approaches. And most excitingly, he is the co-author of an upcoming book that's going to be published this August entitled Tech Stress, How Technology is Hijacking Our Lives, Strategies for Coping and Pragmatic Ergonomics. Rick, take it away.
Hello, you all, and welcome and thank you for being here today. So there's a set of PowerPoint slides, one of which you see up on the screen that describes the title of the talk today. It's called Holistic Health Practices for Enhancing Immune Function and Clarifying Values. I also chose this image of a heart, getting to the heart of the matter, but also the blood vessels, because later on we're going to learn a little bit about how the immune system works, not only through the blood of red blood cells, but the white blood cells as well. Up on the screen now is a bunch of somewhat distressing images. There is the civil and social unrest that's going on around us because we've pulled back the curtain on the enormous amount of social and economic and political inequities, as well as all of the insensitivity that's existing in the world. And by paying attention, we can shift our intention to go ahead and mobilize, whatever mobilize means, actions that will help others as well as ourselves. We have to help ourselves in order to help others. And I want to remind us that history and memory is sometimes brief. History repeats itself. You might notice some of the other images on the screen. We have the Darfur region in Sudan. There was also a Rwandan genocide. There's always been a history of different types of traumatic experiences, men, women, children, old, young, rich, poor. No matter where you live, you might be exposed to a virus like SARS-CoV-2. Now, why did I say SARS-CoV-2? Because that's the designation for the virus, and the disease is called COVID-19. In the bottom left, we have Hurricane Katrina. The bottom right, the Time magazine, Bhopal, India, exposure to an industrial accident, the cyanide exposure, gas was released. And of course, different types of strife throughout history. There's a wide range of responses as opposed to a label like post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Think about a spectrum, a wide range of reactions. In a very incomplete list, somewhat oversimplified list, we have different types of psychological and or psychiatric labels. Depressive episodes and panic disorders and different types of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use, as an example, along with this label called PTSD. People change their behaviors. They get very angry. They get impulsive. They take risks.
Oh, yeah.
Oppositely, they run away from their problems. They have social withdrawal. There are many types of physical symptoms that include pain and fatigue. And regardless of which ones you might have mentioned as related to responsive to post-traumatic stress of some kind, after the trauma happens, after the difficulties have been introduced, we might have a traumatic set of reactions. The two that we're going to talk about somewhat today, loosely, will be immune dysregulation, how it is that exposures affect the immune system, and this PTSD element we'll talk about in terms of identifying what's important to us. How do we clarify our values? So this is a lecture after all. And as an academic, we have to have what I call the box and arrow or the circle and arrow diagram. In the bottom left, there's a box that says stressor. Let me see if I can make this bigger. So you are exposed to stressful circumstances, which then you interpret or evaluate. You say, this is difficult, yet I can manage, or unfortunately, overwhelming to the point that I can't cope or I can't deal with that circumstance. Abstractly, we have strong emotions, we have behaviors, and we have our body responding with hormonal releases. Where it says neuroendocrine response, there are stress hormones that are released from the nervous system. Our emotional, behavioral, and neuroendocrine or neurobiological responses each influence our immune system, which then has a consequence for our health. So what I wanted to do was ask you a question that you can type in a response to in the chat box again. How and or why do reactions to difficult life events influence your immune system? Now, some of y'all know a lot of this stuff. And if you don't know, guess. And if you do know, type in, how do you think when you're exposed to difficulty, whatever those experiences might be, how do they influence your immune system and or your health? Because we know that if you weaken your immune system, it's harder to fight off all the colds and flus. And we know if you have a strengthened immune system, you tend to feel better and get better faster.
Thinking about the stress response and things like cortisol and how that impacts the body. And I've heard that it increases inflammation. And I think inflammation is something that we might recognize ourselves in our bodies.
Beautiful answer. I would absolutely agree with everything that you said. Thank you, thank you. And you're also previewing or predicting what we're going to talk about just in a smidgen way a little bit further on. Let me call on somebody else. Michaela, from your iPhone.
Hi.
Hey.
Sorry, I was at work listening in. The digestive system like shuts down. I notice like when you're under like a lot of stress, some of the things you eat, you have to be a little bit more aware that those like French fries actually might fatigue you more and you won't digest them and you're gonna feel sluggish. Whereas like maybe you should pick something easier to digest, maybe a soup, some bone broth, because that is like easier process because the digestive system isn't working at like full function.
Yes, absolutely correct. And we're going to put a few extra vocabulary and jargon terms onto some of the things that both Michaela and Lauren said. I'm going to go for one more. Let's see. Anne Salisbury, if you could unmute for a moment.
There. Hi, everyone. In addition to what everybody else has said, I think it puts it puts you in a state of constant agitation, and which is both inflammatory, and it also reduces the ability to focus and to think and to be productive.
Yes.
So I think it affects every system, and particularly the immune system in a negative way.
Outstanding. And all of you got an A++ on this test. You didn't know there was going to be a test. One of the comments was, I didn't know there was going to be a test. And it's sort of the way we interact in our lecture series. So I'm going to offer another diagram that has a conceptual model. The conceptual model has a couple of elements. First, the title of the slide, the inhibitory effects of, in quotes, too much cortisol, which then raises the question, what is this thing called cortisol? Because everyone thinks of cortisol as the stress hormone. And I wanted to subtly divine the distinction between an appropriate amount of cortisol. Every day, every mammal, not just humans, wakes up and they have a certain relationship of cortisol, which helps us, among other things, regulate our sugar metabolism and our energy metabolism. One of the problems is when we have too much cortisol and stress reactions, whatever stress reactions means, we have too much cortisol being expressed. Too much cortisol can suppress the immune system. Now, I haven't given you any evidence nor mechanisms that explain how cortisol suppresses the immune system, nor am I going to go into many of the other types of jargon. I put this slide up here so that when and if you go back and look at these slides, you can go ahead and type in to a Google lookup what these words mean. And more importantly, it's the relationship that matters, where too much cortisol suppresses the immune response is the take home at the sort of the right-hand side, the immune system. That's the piece that I wanted to get across. Normal, healthy amounts of cortisol, good. Too much overwhelms the system and then weakens it. There's a second slide up here. This one says breathing. So on the breathing slide, I wanted to note that there are many, many kinds of breathing. You probably already know that if you type in to the images page on Google, you have a toolbar that says, go ahead and acquire or capture license-free images. So all of these are license-free images. And if you need to know where they came from, I can show you. But when I typed in breathing into Google Images for all the license-free examples, these are a sampling of what I got. Many people associate breathing with sometimes life-saving firefighters or a medic, sometimes scuba diving. The bottom three are kind of that yoga piece, yoga, meditation, calming type of thing. And then I put this one in the middle that I call it the breath of fire, which is the fire breathing type of thing. But I wanted to talk a little bit about breathing. How and why does breathing help calm your system? And when you calm your system, there's an argument later on that will be you reduce the excessive expression of cortisol, which then does not regulate or suppress the immune system as often. And therefore, with no suppression of the immune system, your system can fight off all the critters out there. That's the argument. So here's the question. Type into the chat box. Why does breathing help calm the body? Why would calming the body improve the immune function? I kind of gave a hint. So pick either one of those two questions. And then when you're done, we're going to do some breathing exercises. So Elena, I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what'd you write?
Yeah, that it slows the heart rate and brings more oxygen to the system, which I think like reduces all kinds of tension, be it physical or mental.
Outstanding answer. That's terrific. So Blessing, what did you say?
I used your words, helps reduce excessive expression of cortisol. And I was just in a somatic workshop this morning where we do a lot of breath work. We actually did humming. And yes, it just totally globally, it brings a well, the humming did help the resonance, but the breath, that it just, I write poetry after. I'm in a very creative place, a very calm place, which is much more productive than being in fight or flight.
Absolutely correct. And thank you for sharing. And by the way, there's a whole other lecture that Eric Pepper does on the notion of toning, like humming. So versus ha, or other ways of releasing and having the vocal cords vibrate, and feel that vibration through your body.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. That was a real wonderful reminder. I was thinking about all the different humming and toning and chanting and ways of singing and bringing vibrations, whatever vibrations mean, in a resonant way into our lives and into our bodies. So as you know, there are probably a very large number of techniques for calming and settling that all influence the breathing system. And I want to offer you a conceptual framework. The conceptual framework is to help reduce our excessive expression of cortisol, which would unfortunately inhibit some of our immune function, in order to calm the system down. Why is it, arguably, that breathing techniques, humming, chanting, singing techniques, and I'm going to go even further, different types of yoga stretching, Tai Chi, Qigong, Alexander, Feldenkrais, moving your body in somatic activities, as well as arguably in a list, pet therapy and art therapy and nature therapy and many types of therapeutic experiences.
It restores coherence.
Yes, writing therapy, prayer, any type of technique that you have shares something in common, the argument is going to go. All of those techniques help shift or calm your breathing. And now a question is raised in a slightly different way. Why is it that influencing your breathing can influence your body or your system? And here's a possible answer. I'm going to show you a complex or complicated slide right now. This slide says chemicals that calm the body. And there's a bunch of jargon on this slide. I'm not going to ask anybody any test questions on this particular slide. In the right-hand side, it says key to figure 1, GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric acid receptor, but GABA is the chemical that helps, among other things, serve to inhibit an overactive nervous system. That is to say, when you increase gamma aminobutyric acid, that helps calm or soothe or smooth out many of the stress reactions. These GABA receptors are well distributed throughout the body, and especially so, in the lungs, in the heart, and in the gastrointestinal system. That is to say, how is it that changing how you're breathing or what's going on in your lungs influences your ability to calm down by releasing a chemical like GABA? How is it that regulating the heart rhythm, the cardiac cycle, helps influence this GABA set of chemicals going through the body? And even when you have a healthy and happy gut, your gastrointestinal system, you also have a communication pathway to the nervous system that helps regulate, calm, or smooth or soothe the body. There is a lot more to say. I'll just give you a hint, but not for today. Does anybody know what's serotonin's role is in the body? And now probably I see some head shaking, yes. But does anybody know where serotonin is primarily produced? It's a gut-associated peptide. It's mostly in the gut and not as much in the central nervous system. So if we have a happy gut, we're gonna release some GABA, some serotonin, a happy heart, GABA, a happy lung, GABA. That's an argument. So I'm gonna stop sharing and look for any chat that you might have with comments or questions about the argument that says, take your technique of choice, take your therapeutic approach, to calm or deal with any of the stressful life circumstances that you might have been exposed to, and ask the question particularly, how is it that those techniques help you shift or regulate or otherwise address your breathing in a way that arguably can then calm you down? And so I don't know if there are any questions about that argument. And it takes me out of my mind and into my body. Yes. Breathing calms the body, reduces the heart rate. Yes. Takes me out of my monkey mind. Yes. Lots and lots of other things. So I'd like to try a breathing technique, and there are many of them, and I'm only going to try one for this recording. And it's a particular one about our senses, our sensory awareness of what we hear and what we feel and what we see abstractly. So for example, if you would listen to my words, however, either lower your gaze, or if you're comfortable, close your eyes, and with the volume up, just begin listening to the sounds going on around you. Those could be including my voice. They could be traffic noise behind you. They could be people in the other room. They could be the high-pitched Wi-Fi sound in the room or the building where you live. Any sounds at all going on around you, just let those filter through your consciousness and awareness as easily as you're sitting there now. Begin shifting your awareness from the sounds going on around you to other senses. For example, you might want to feel where your hands are in three-dimensional space. Are they touching the fabric of your clothing? Is one hand touching the other as you sit calmly there? So feel the warmth of your hands through the clothing or through touching one hand or the other. And then begin extending your breath in a special way. I'd like you to take a long breath in for about 4 or 5 seconds in duration. Exhale for about 5 or 6 seconds, slightly longer exhale. So that if you inhale over a duration of 4 or 5 seconds and exhale for about that time, that's over 10 seconds time. A really long breath would take about 10 seconds, both the inhale and the exhale. As easily as you're sitting there now, go ahead and relax your shoulders even more than they are. Go ahead and feel your head and neck muscles relax, release and relax your jaw muscles. You might wiggle your jaw or feel your jaw even further and more subtly. So relax and release the mouth muscles, the tongue muscles. Let the tip of the tongue relax all the way down to the base of the mouth. Moving from listening to the sounds around you to feeling parts of your body. If you would now image or visualize someone in your life who is nice and kind, who can make you feel safe and reassured that all is well, who can bring a smile to your face inwardly or even outwardly. I know that this is a very brief interaction. We're going on 1.5 minutes now. Whenever you're ready and at your own pace, feel free to wiggle your fingers or your toes, yawn, stretch, bring awareness back to the room. Go ahead, and when you're ready, open up your eyes, and if they were closed, and just checking in with folks. That was a super mini vacation of a kind. And at the same time, the intention was to have you experience what it felt like in your body to go down to a calm, slow breathing pace. I'm going to be technical in some jargon for a moment. When you breathe in and out over 10 seconds time, in for 4 or 5 seconds, out for 5 or 6 seconds, that's one breath over 10 seconds. It goes into a minute 6 times. 10 seconds goes into a minute 6 times. 6 breaths in 1 minute is considered a very calming and soothing pace from the point of the central nervous system. Where we have our body, which posture or position, are we lying on our belly or lying on our back? Are we standing up or on our head? The way we position our body, how we have our hands positioned and our arms and our legs positioned. The location even of things like where our tongue is. Do we breathe in and out from the left or the right nostril in alternating patterns? There are dozens, maybe hundreds of patterns of breathing techniques. Find the ones that work for you, because the argument that was presented earlier is, as you regulate your breathing deliberately, so you can then calm and soothe the nervous system, among other ways, through this release of soothing chemicals. And that's one of the take-home exercises. Before we go on, I don't know if there are any comments and questions. Feel free to type them into the chat box. But I'd like to shift gears now to a slide about the exposures. We're exposed to many things right now with the coronaviruses, but there are other things as well. In the upper left on this screen, there's some pollen, because it's pollen season for some folks still. There are other types of viruses besides coronaviruses. There are rhinoviruses and influenza viruses and many other kinds of critters out there. There are bacterias and industrial chemicals and many, many things that we're exposed to. On the right-hand side, and by the way, these are little micrographs. So the top one in red with the little blue specks, that's a decade ago or more. That's going to be the SARS virus. What we have on the bottom is the SARS-CoV-2, which is the coronavirus that everybody's worried about, and it multiplies in a different way. It's much more contagious and much more prolific than the older versions of the SARS. One of the challenges in the right-hand side is that this particular variety, this novel coronavirus, attacks not only the lungs, but it also attacks the blood vessels, the vasculature. So next slide is fairly complex. On the side with the lungs on it, we have breathing in, the virus then enters the lungs. The sort of the middle area is this little red circle, little purple viral particles there, and the interchange between the blood vessels, the veins and the arteries, is how the coronavirus that gets breathed in through your nose, for example, and goes into the lungs, then enters the little small bottom right blood vessels, the little capillary beds, and that's where the trouble begins. Here's a larger slide of the vascular invasion or infection. This is the more current hypothesis around how the COVID-19 disease starts. It starts infecting the blood vessels. And by the way, on this slide that's a little bit larger, surrounding the arteries and the veins are smooth muscle tissues. So we calm our system, those smooth muscle tissues relax, open up, and allow the free flow of liquids, blood, or immune cells. When we are constricting or tightening those muscles, we're all tense, literally and figuratively speaking. Less of that interchange occurs. that's much more problematic, not only from a blood pressure standpoint, but from a standpoint of the viral particles doing more damage in the local areas. Whereas in a medical school pathology class, we would go into some of the mechanisms. There isn't time in this introductory presentation. Yet, when you review this slide, there are references to go back to, and you can go into greater depth at some point when you want. So this question is, why have you come to believe, or what have you come to believe about COVID-19 pandemic in regards to how the virus suppresses the immune system? And there's lots of hypotheses out there. Hypotheses are it's suppressing the immune system because it was manufactured and it's a war, weapon of mass destruction. To well, it's a problem that came from global warming and climate change, and it was released through the Arctic melting, and our immune systems are not adapted to that ancient virus. To nope, it got transferred from somewhere. You believe something about what this disease is and where it came from and how it's come to suppress our immune systems. So if you have any hypotheses, type them into the chat box. And that'll give us a sense of what you've heard, and as well, how to think in the future about tailoring some of the lectures and or the topics to help. I'm going to go through some of the slides a little bit more efficiently as we go forward. I wanted to introduce a term that's a bit of a jargon term. It's called a cytokine storm. Cyto or site refers to a cell. Kine refers to a chemical, a cell chemical storm. Which cells? They're the immune cells. Which chemicals? The immune chemicals. They have different names. So at the bottom of this little figurative tornado or storm is a bunch of letters like IL-6 in the middle in blue, and as well TNF, tumor necrosis factor. There's lots and lots of chemical names that are referred to. Apparently, the virus goes in through the nose, gets into the lungs. The lung tissue says, oh, I now have this virus in my lung vessels, my blood vessels in my lungs, my little capillary beds, and I need to fight against that virus by releasing all types of cell chemicals, cytokines. The problem is that with this novel coronavirus, the immune system just basically says, let's go ahead and fire everything we got, metaphorically in a military metaphor. Let's fire all our guns, all our missiles, all our bombs. And those chemicals create a liquid soup of a kind, creating a pneumonia. You basically can be overwhelmed and figuratively drowning in the fluids that are released too rapidly. There's a second or a separate idea where these chemicals are stimulating and or inhibiting various functions throughout the body. Arguably, currently, the belief is that this virus is a vascular tropic or blood vessel disease. So it can distribute itself all over the body in different locations, which then have different releases of chemicals. By the way, in the same way that breathing helps calm the nervous system, physical activity and exercise also help strengthen the musculature and the vasculature. That is to say, you're going to strengthen the ability of the blood vessels to fight against the virus if you are more physically active or physically fit, whatever that means. Here's some sad pictures from the blood vessels not doing their thing because the virus can attack different locations. This is a person's hands or limbs being differentially affected. You get good blood flow in one part, but not good blood flow in the other. And again, that's the object. Now, if you are exposed to all of these physical things, there's also some psychological and or spiritual reactions. So I'm going to segue the talk to ask about what is or are psychological and or spiritual resiliency. What does resiliency mean? If you sadly are infected with bacteria, viruses, parasites, funguses, industrial chemicals, air pollutants, traumatic experiences, difficulty of any kind, it is not only the physical, but it's also the psychological and the spiritual, psycho-emotional. What is resiliency? So type into, when you've had exposure to these difficult life circumstances, what made you resilient? I'm stopping sharing so I can read some of the chat. Maintaining hope for the future, getting support from loved ones and supporting loved ones, believing that things will be okay. Where do those beliefs come from? Yeah, excellent, excellent ideas from the chats. And reflecting about what a good life is. Remaining optimistic. Yes, excellent, excellent answers. Let me go back to sharing the screen. We have about another 15 minutes or so, and I'm going to try to move through the rest of the slides in roughly the next 5 or 10 minutes and leave time for some questions. And so up on the screen again is one of those academic slides. I put it up here so that when you review, or if you review these slide sets, you can know where these abstract ideas came from. They are not the answers, they are simply a sample of various notions or models of this concept of resiliency. And there are many varieties that are similar to this set of ideas associated with what resiliency is about. The piece that I wanted to focus on was this abstract notion in the positive psychology domain of something called strengths and virtues. Those things that people find give them strength. For thousands of years, concepts abstractly like courage was very, and wisdom and temperance and justice, or humanity or spirituality. A more modern take roughly identifies 24 different virtues and strengths. Not only things like courage and justice, but also appreciation of beauty and capacity for love and creativity and curiosity, etc. Here is yet another. I couldn't quite get the background to show up against the blue, so it's in white. It was a colorful rainbow. And I'm going to focus on the word courage, the purple, that has to do with persistence as well as bravery. There are others there that you might read. And again, in a longer semester's time, there would be an expanded conversation about each of these abstract notions. Courage comes in many different varieties. The courage to create, the courage to change, enlightened courage, the red badge of courage, etc. So how do we think about courage? The ordinary sense is courage under fire, a war zone, or saving people from a burning building. One of the bits of research that I engaged in some time ago was with firefighters, first responders. We asked them questions during their recruit training. How is it that you were able to get up every day and train to save people from burning buildings? They had to improve their skills in many ways. We looked at the relationship between their behaviors, their actual skills to fight fires and to save people, with their attitudes about what they were doing, their courageous attitudes. I'm going to throw in one more jargon term, which is resiliency and courage and psychological hardiness, how hardy they were. This is an image from a lab when I was in graduate school, and I will reveal for those that might recognize my wife in the middle in the chair. We met in graduate school. Yeah, I used the family member as a guinea pig. Well, we weren't married at that point, but we did get married. So the procedure was we fill out paperwork, we connect up all kinds of sensors to figure out what's going on with the person's body and their reactions to difficult circumstances. We measured their heart rate and their blood pressure and other muscle tension, many signs of stress and strain. And we also measured their anxiety level and their positive attitudes and their hardy attitudes and their resiliency. Again, for a longer conversation, folks who have a hardier attitude, higher in hardiness, had a greater improvement and a greater ability and a greater set of skills. They were able to deal with difficult life circumstances better. At the top of this pyramid is challenge. The concept is when you are challenged with difficult circumstances, then you go to the right, you learn to control them, whatever control means, which would then give you the ability to commit to go forward further and say, this circumstance is difficult, yet manageable. So the cycle or the circle of courage has 3 intersecting steps or sets of components. We identify the ways that you're challenged, whatever that means, the ways that you've struggled to influence those outcomes, the way that you've learned to control, whatever that means, and the ways that you've engaged versus detached, that you're committed versus running away from the problem. And those 3 tend to reflect a particular kind of resiliency and strength that is very important for dealing with various life circumstances that are overwhelming. So in the slide, it says values clarification exercise. So here's at the end of the talk, near the end of the talk, where we're finally getting to this clarifying values. I'd like you now to follow the directions. If you would, write the numbers in a vertical column 1 through 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, vertical column with 10 numbers. A little bit of space between the numbers. So if you all have 10 in a vertical column written down, 1 through 10, I'm going to ask you as quickly as you are able to write down 10 most important things to you, the 10 most important things right now off the top of your head. And it could be everything from your iPhone or your safe place to live. It could be abstract things, peace, love, justice, God. It could be particular family members that you value, anything that's valuable to you. 10 most important things, just list them down. The values clarification exercise comes from a long history of literature about what's important and relevant and meaningful in our lives. And the last slide, last 2 slides, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I'll try again tomorrow. This is the thought for today. Most smiles are started by another smile. And we're pretty much finished up for today.